Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I'm here with Delphi Nile, who is a third degree Alexandrian High Priestess and Firewalk Instructor based in South Wales in the UK. As well, she's also runs the Scales of the Dryad Coven. She's active in her local community, teaching and hosting open sabbats, seasonal rites, and also runs annual conferences and holds retreats. So without further ado, I am delighted to bring Delphi onto the screen. So welcome, Delphi. Thank you for joining me for The Magic in You.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. And I think I might just let the audience know that we may be visited by some of your entourage, your pets, your cats and dogs. So if people see animals in the background, that's fine. This means that we are very organic and we're live as well. So why don't we dive into some of the questions, Delphi? How did you, well, I did introduce you as an Alexandrian High Priestess, a third degree. How did you become a third degree Alexandrian tradition? What was it that drew you to this particular path?
So I didn't initially set out to be Alexandrian per se. I know a lot of seekers kind of set their hearts on Alexandrian or Gardnerian or a particular tradition. It just happened that the coven who I came across when I was at university via a little pagan society were working in an Alexandrian way. So they were loosely Alexandrian, as a lot of groups, I think, got hold of the Witch's Bible, joined a coven, left a coven. So I worked with them loosely, and then my initiator popped up at the local moot, and Peter Nash, we got on together really, really well. And I just kind of fell into it from there. It just made sense.
Thank you for sharing it. So what do you mean by it making sense? Because I'm sort of asking this question, 'cause I know to me, I'm also an Alexandrian. I had just say a grey area initiation back in the early 2000s, couldn't claim direct lineage, went off and did my own thing, did my own sort of Alexandrian light sort of witchcraft. And then more recently, I've got direct lineage. And there was there's something about the Alexandrian tradition that resonated with me. So I'm curious, and also for other seekers out there, with there being so many different interpretations of witchcraft these days, what do you mean? What was the drawing part of this particular tradition as opposed to anything else, or just being eclectic? So what was it about the Alexandrian tradition for you?
Okay, I'm going to say something terrible here. First of all, it was the lineage, because the first coven that I got involved in were, I suppose, what we would call in Alexandrian terms, an illegal coven. Our HP was claiming lineage that he didn't have, which was thankfully disclaimed by the gentleman who came along to us, who was actually a third degree. And I wanted to make sure that anything that I had to offer I've always been very spiritual, and I always knew that teaching was going to be where I ended up. So I wanted to make sure that whatever space I held was lineaged. I don't think there's anything wrong with people working without lineage. A witch is a witch is a witch. But I wanted to be able to do things like work for the Pagan Federation, do chaplaincy at the local prison, things like that, where I had, I suppose, a solid trace back of legitimacy, if that makes sense. And when I first started, I said yes to the initiation, or requested initiation, when I knew that it was a potential. But when I started reading deeper into Alexandrian witchcraft, I've got to be honest, my first thought was, well, Alex was a bit of a prat, wasn't he? Because I remember reading in, I think it was King of the Witches, a story where he took somebody through their second degree and he stayed there with them. They slept in the temple overnight, and then the gentleman woke up and displayed some strange tendencies, at which point Alex expelled him from everything. And I remember thinking, even back then as a first degree, when you do your first degree, it's very much the goddess energy. It's very much that kind of like open path. When you get to that second, you get that heavier energy come in, that God energy, and you open up so much in somebody that I found it hugely irresponsible to open that up in somebody and then just expel them. So it took me a long time to, I suppose, to do more research, to speak to more craft elders and realize that what you read in the books, you know, Alex was nothing if not a showman. And to, I think, to understand the difference between real Alexandrian practice and the kind of stuff that we can pick up in some of the books written about Alex.
Oh yes, I certainly agree, especially in this day and age where Maxine Sanders, Alex's wife or ex-wife, is beginning to sort of write a few more books or give commentary to earlier collections of Alex's notes to give a little bit more of an insight into the man and how he was a bit of he's a trickster, a character. It's almost like he sort of like tested everybody to see if they were worthy. And on one hand, yet on the other hand, he's renowned for being so generous and giving away everything, including the shirt off his own back to people as well. So depending on what sort of person you met on the day. So that's wonderful. So you wanted to this direct lineage essence was a real big thing to you. And for people who aren't familiar with Peter Nash, I have reached out to Peter to see if he would be interested in joining me on the Magic and You, but he declined, which is fine. Now he has sort of a place in witchcraft history himself. Are you at liberty to sort of share a little bit about Peter, or would you like to? Just so people have a little bit of an idea as to where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe Peter was Alex's penultimate initiate. There is a lady in Mid Wales, I believe, who was his last initiate, but it was believed for quite a while that Peter was his last. Peter was working with Alex towards the end of his kind of magical career. And I think that's why I identify with Peter so much, because he, from the other side of the UK, just kind of had this urge to go find the source of what he was looking for. And you know, Peter can be somewhat controversial, but then I think a lot of the high priesthood can. But he's been very much a gateway drug for me into the world of Alexandrian witchcraft, and remains a really good friend. He specializes very much in house cleansings, and I think we refer to it lovingly as the Nash Mafia is one of the most prolific lines of Alexandrian initiates.
Yes.
But yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. I also, I've got a deep love of Maxine. I've been lucky enough to spend some time with her. And I think that the knowledge that is to be found from those first liners is becoming a very rare thing. And there are a lot of changes coming into British traditional witchcraft, some of which I think are necessary because it's a living craft, some of which put it in danger of becoming less a tradition. So somebody like Maxine, she's Marmite. People love her or they hate her. But she does stick to her guns. And I've got a huge amount of respect for anybody who just says, this is the way I work, like it or lump it. This is what I can teach you, take it or leave it.
Yes. And so she gives you that opportunity to, you said, walk away if you don't agree or it doesn't resonate with you. But at least you know where you stand with her and you know why she has this stance as well. So that's really, especially for the seeker too. And as you said, there's a lot of sort of social changes that have happened since 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even the last 10 years, a lot of social changes as well, which from an outsider's point of view can, or people like to or try to impose that upon the craft. But as you said, it is a tradition and there's a reason why it's a tradition. Some things stay the same. And from my point of view, it's often not until you actually work, you get initiated into the circles that you understand why things happen as well.
Yeah. Yes. I think it was Maxine who said to me, Alexandrian witchcraft has few secrets, but many mysteries. And that's something that has lodged itself into my soul somewhere. Because I think, the way I practice is very open. Obviously, my inner court work inside the coven remains in the coven, but I do an awful lot of community work. And there are those who say, oh, should you be doing witchcraft courses? Should you be doing these things? Well, absolutely, because if I'd written a book on it, there'd be no judgment. If I'm running a course on it, what I'm doing is I'm appealing to the many, many people who are feeling a pull towards witchcraft, whether it be the spiritual element of Wicca, or whether it be the practice of witchcraft. And they don't want to join a coven. They're not for the priesthood, in the same way as not every Christian is going to want to become a priest or a vicar. Not every person who practices witchcraft or every pagan is going to want to become a druid in Obod or a member of the priesthood. So I think providing places where people can come and celebrate the wheel of the year. You know, this is something that thousands of years ago would have been a community thing. So for me, witchcraft and priesthood in the community is immensely important. But trying to navigate that, where some people are very, very kind of like, this is behind closed doors. Yes, there are things that are oath bound, but there's an awful lot that you can just get on the internet. And as far as I'm concerned, if it's something that people can find and practice themselves, then there's no harm in guiding them or providing a safe space for them to do that with an elder who's been there, made the mistakes themselves, not because I know it all, but because I know a lot of what not to do, because I've done a lot of what not to do.
Oh, yes, I certainly agree with that. And this is sort of like a nice segue into your sort of your priestessing for the community. So you offer a lot of it, in particular the Wheel of the Year. And I know I'm sort of jumping around because my head's sort of circling at many miles an hour that my mouth can keep up. But I feel that connecting in with the sabbats, with the Wheel of the Year, very foundational and grounding. I'm living in Australia because everything's sort of upside down and back to front. So it's necessary to sort of connect in with the land. So we sort of have our foundation upon which we can build our craft. And this is something that I don't often see talked about in online spaces a lot. So my understanding, if you're holding these open gatherings for the community, you are helping people get or gain a different level, a deeper level of connection to their own craft than what they may get from online as well. So it's a very necessary service, in my opinion. But how did you get started in your magical journey?
Oh, I think probably with the deck of tarot cards when I was about 12. My father's side of the family were very culturally diverse, with part of the family coming from Channel Islands, French, but with his father's family coming from Roma, who had settled, and it was very much a not talked about part of the family. My father had very disconnected connections, had disconnected very much with that side of his family. And I think it was, throwaway comments growing up about the fact that my skin isn't necessarily particularly British. It's got a distinctive sallow yellow undertone. I've got big hair, which is quite tame today. And, there were throwaway comments like, oh, your gypsy skin or your gypsy hair, that'll be from blah, blah, blah. And I felt, I suppose as a young woman in the south of England, it was romantic, it was exciting, it was exotic, and I wanted to connect with that part of my lineage. I wanted to know who I was. I saw things differently. I felt things differently to other people I knew. And it seemed like, I suppose it's a very basic, what do we know about gypsies? They read cards, from the mind of a 12-year-old. So I gave my sister money to buy me a set of tarot cards, scared the pants off of me, and I put them back in the drawer for about a year. But it led very quickly on to cassiometry, onto my sister buying me some books on chiromancy from, I think it was Atlantis in London. And I just read everything I could. At the time, I was actively a practicing Christian, and regularly having my tarot cards taken away from me. But I began working with magic as a practical tool and divination as a practical tool significantly before I came across the idea of living, breathing witches and Wicca and paganism. And that was through me Googling in the early days of the accessible internet, probably in about 96, 97, looking for Romany magic just to see if I could connect that a little bit deeper. And it just came up with an FAQ on Wicca. And it took me into, not into British traditional witchcraft, but it took me into the very watered down is the wrong word, but the very socially popular Wicca with two C's kind of Silver Raven Wolf, who, do you know what, I still love. I was I was on an international kind of like online witchcraft conference earlier on this year, and I was on the same bill as Silver Raven Wolf, and I nearly weed myself. I was like, oh, look at this. I had here when I was a little girl, when I was a teenager, I wanted nothing but to find a high priestess to teach me. And every now and again I kind of think, when I'm doing what I'm doing, when I'm making things accessible, I think about what, probably for the majority of things I do, I think, what would 16, 17-year-old me walking what seemed like a really blinking lonely path, what would I have wanted to come across? What would I have wanted to find? And that's what I try to accommodate.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the important thing too, especially in this day and age. I mean, we've gone through COVID, everybody was shut away and isolated. But I don't know if it's the same where you are in Wales, but over here in Australia, there's a bit of a well, at least where I live, but it's sort of a bit of a hesitancy for people to come out again, to socialize in the flesh. It's like we've gotten so used to hiding behind screens and being in online spaces that, you know, we're not sort of going out with the moots and with the gatherings as we used to have before COVID. And I'm very much of a person, well, I can't say that because, you know, I have my moments with people, but I prefer to work with people in person as opposed to online. And so anybody who's doing sort of like priestessing work or community work, I mean, I hold full moon gatherings, yeah, horror, but it's again, it's that sort of community building. And there's something that even for solitaries, to work with other people, it just gives out a completely different energy as well.
Yeah. And without the need to join a coven, without the need to dedicate that much of your time or energy, just to be around people you can learn from, who are walking maybe not the same but a similar path to you. It's definitely something that did become significantly less accessible. I know that there used to be loads in the way of conferences. We used to have, you know, Witchfest running in Cardiff quite often, PF conferences, and down the years I've just seen them become less and less. There was a beautiful one in Cornwall that I used to go to yearly, and my children were raised there. They used to come every year. I'm very inclusive with the family when it comes to the sabbats. And it stopped during lockdown and it became an online conference. And so last year I set up my own conference, and I've been very honest with them. I was like, I basically ripped off your conference because I miss it and you're not doing it anymore, so I'm going to do the same thing in South Wales. But it's bringing back that vibe, and it's so lovely.
Yeah, so it gives people that sort of, as you say, that community and family thing, especially like for the sabbats, because they are sort of family orientated for the most part anyway. And it's a good way, again, if you take away sort of like the religious witchcraft aspect out of it, out of the question, it's connecting in with nature. And what's so wrong about that? As far as I can see, it's what we much needed in this world.
Yeah. And I know, you know, you're kind of post Beltane there, but here we've just slid into the dark half of the year. And the amount of people who struggle with things like SAD, you know, that I work as a therapist part-time as well, and people's mental health goes, but to have that basic understanding of, you don't have to be as productive. This part of the year is all about letting go, being able to bring people around a fire and light candles for their ancestors, to hold space, to say, do you know what, it's time to carry all of the stuff that you're not supposed to be carrying because you don't want to be laden go. It just makes them check in with themselves, feeling what the earth is doing. We don't live like we used to live. You know, most of us, we're so surrounded by our creature comforts and our mod cons that we might go, oh, look, it's horrible outside, it's winter. But what we don't do is go through that letting go process, don't go through that kind of like feeling the heartbeat of the earth coming in again in the spring. It's, I think, to actually get out there and feel it. I railroaded my former coven into taking on an allotment, and they were like, do we really have to do this? And I was like, absolutely. Get your hands dirty, get your shoes off, feel it.
And then that's the whole thing. It's like when you're planting your, you know, the seeds, or even if you get seedlings, and seeing them sort of like coming to fruition, and then harvesting your own crop and tasting the tomatoes and seeing how different they taste to those that you buy in the shop, or the apple, that first crunch of your first apple that you've bought, even if you don't have an allotment, if you can go to like a farmer's market or something like that and buy produce that's in season, they just taste so much different and better for us as well.
Definitely.
So why don't we come back to you and the path that you're following, Alexandrian High Priestess. So how do you think this has sort of shaped you or improved you or even challenged you over the years that you've been walking this path?
Oh, I have no idea who I would be without my craft. It's it's been, I suppose, such a huge part of who I am that the rest of my life kind of revolves around that. I'm for my roles in life, I'm first and foremost a mother and secondly a priestess, and I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. And I think so. I'm going to go back to a conversation I had with Peter when I was young, 18 or 19, and me asking him about the degree system. You know, my first question, as is I think a lot of young women's, is, do I have to do the thing for my third degree? And he was like, no, 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 no. We have other ways, it's fine. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, now talk me through the degree system. And he explained it to me like, you know, your first degree, you step foot on the path, you light a little beacon, you accept a role in the priesthood, and you begin learning. The second degree, you learn to teach, you learn to hold space, you take on more responsibility. Your third degree, you go where the gods send you. Think really hard before you take the third degree, because that is where you give your life over to the gods. And I think I won't say I underestimated it. You know, young me was like, oh, wonderful, great, I can't wait to be a high priestess. But I think I underestimated how much that would shape what I did with my life, from being perfectly comfortable in a job or a marriage or running a coven for 10 years, and then suddenly the wind changes and you feel that call, then it's like, I'm not supposed to be here anymore. And knowing that I've signed up to say, okay, where do you want me next? And that has caused big destruction. Um, but it has also invariably put me exactly where I'm supposed to be. But sometimes I think, wouldn't it be nice to have my stable job and my 2.4 children and my lovely house? But I would be miserable. I would be miserable. I feel whether there is, as there is at the moment, a beautiful leak in my bathroom ceiling and everything is carnage and you end up carrying everybody's problems and all of the responsibilities. I have such a deep content that is, I, yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy, but I am so deliriously happy with what I do. And sometimes there is a feeling of loss there, I think, you know, when you think about what is the standard. And what, no, 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 doggo, get down. I'm so sorry. We're being attacked by a collie. I'm going to lift up my tripod and move it, go away. But yeah, I think when you learn to free fall and trust that the gods have got you, then you're doing the right thing, maybe.
And I think that that's the important thing to sort of like remember, is just like it's trust. There's a reason. It's a deep calling, and sometimes I wonder what would my life be. I'd love to have a simple life, but I wouldn't know what that was. You know, we have what I call over here footy and meat pie sort of life, and you know, your house with a picket fence, and I'm going, no, I'll be bored. I'll be bored. But yes. But it is having that trust and going with the flows. And so this is sort of like coming back to the analogy of the seasons. It's just like knowing when there's a fallow time, knowing when it's time to sort of like bring things to a close, just sit there and wait for something new to come through and materialize in your life. Yeah. So it's not all a bed of roses like some people might think as well.
No, I mean, I would have thought I should be able to levitate by now, and but I think it's that when that understanding hits you, and you know what, sometimes it doesn't hit somebody, it doesn't hit them at all, and I think that's a great shame. But I think that when it does hit you, to understand that it's not about power, it's about service. And that is kind of something that is deeply rooted into me and made me kind of think, oh, and also, okay. It's I think you can tell the people who have figured that out and the people who haven't. There's no space for ego. Yes, there is hierarchy. Yes, there has to be, these systems, but hell, I know less now than I did when I was 16 and first starting.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention hierarchy, because that seems to be one of these words today that everybody sort of got, oh, we don't want to do hierarchy, that's a controlling thing. But it's not. I mean, we have seen sort of like abuses of it. We see abuses of power, we see abuses of everything these days. And it is, power itself is a double-edged sword. But you do need foundation or guidance or structure in some places in our lives as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is where the secretiveness, secrecy is the word I'm looking for, that we do have in craft is again something that we can protect us as the hidden children of the goddess, but also can be detrimental as far as safeguarding goes, because as in every path, as in every tradition, not everybody is going to be responsible. Not everybody is going to hold that space with integrity. And I think this is where it's fantastic that we have so much in the way of communication, where we have initiate groups linking people across the world, where somebody can say, hey, can you vouch for so and so, or this is happening, we're not sure about that. And we have that network where I think it's back to the few secrets, many mysteries. I think, when we can get over ourselves as far as some of that secrecy goes, with enough ability to connect with each other and look after each other, then I think that's an incredible thing.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So, having walked this path for a number of years now, is there anything that you know now that you sort of wish that you knew when you commenced your journey?
Possibly that I will never, ever, ever know it all. Possibly that, I don't know, it sounds very dark if I say that there is always a price to pay, there is always an exchange, because I would absolutely do it again exactly the same way. Maybe I wouldn't have got married quite so many times. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think knowing that perhaps somebody having a particular degree doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be there with integrity or be able to speak with authority, that people make mistakes, that high priesthood make mistakes as much as a neophyte will make mistakes. And I would have learned to be boundaried a lot sooner. I was a very pure-hearted kind of like little Queen of Cups, and I've had to learn a lot down the road about protecting myself, as a high priestess as much as everything else, because I think people can put you on a pedestal, and that leaves you open to letting people down. So I think keeping your humanness whilst keeping those boundaries, being able to maintain authority, but with enough, I suppose, enough compassion to support people. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's a very difficult balancing act to sort of have. Yes. And I think that the whole thing is like we're human and so is everybody else. And when you start putting people on pedestals and we've all sort of been there, we then forget that, you cut them and they bleed. And things, life happens and sometimes they're having an off day and that's okay. And they're just not there for you when you need them because maybe their life is going to hell in the handbasket as well. So everybody, what happens to you happens to everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's it. Compassion is, I used to be very, very much of a knee-jerk reaction kind of person. And I suppose my biggest lesson has been compassion, knowing that everybody is going through their stuff and that that's not necessarily about you. But also being prepared to be a villain in somebody else's story, if necessary. What other people think of me isn't my business.
Yeah, yes. And I think also in today's world where there's so much emphasis, or we're so used to instant gratification and having people respond to us instantly. And I can see it from a seeker's point of view. They've probably heard all the bad stories and the horror stories, and they want to know everything. And it's just like sometimes you can't. Sometimes, unfortunately, you do need to go through those sort of roller coaster experiences for your own learnings as well. Because if someone gave you, everything on a silver platter, you're not going to learn anything, basically. Sad, but
This is
that's
something
life.
that yeah, this is something we see an awful lot more nowadays, I think, than we used to, with people requesting to join a coven and wanting to kind of like come in and fast track and have everything immediately. And I think it's a real learning curve for people in today's world to be told to wait, to be told to start from the beginning, to learn slowly, to being told that they must do things a particular way. Whereas I think back in the 90s, it was the information was hard to get, and we were just so very grateful for what we could find. And when we did find somebody to teach us, somebody to hold that space, it was like, oh wow, yes, I will literally do anything, just just let me learn from you. And now information is everywhere, and it's almost, I think it's as bad as it being hard to find the information, because now there's so much pants out there that you've got to sift through. And it's you get people coming in being like, well, I know it all anyway. Good, then you don't need to join a coven, go do something else. Go work elsewhere.
Yes. And so, yeah, there might be a lot of information, but how much of that is wisdom or knowledge? That's the difference.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's this sort of like people are experimenting and wanting to try things and are so keen, which is fantastic, but it's not a race. It really isn't a race. It's just like, just slow down and just sit with something and it's almost like, I mean, when I was doing my energetic healing with Reiki, that, we did our Reiki 1, then 6 months to a year later, you did your Reiki 2, and then I think it was even up to 5 years before you could do your masters. These days, they shove it all through in 2 weekends, and I'm going, how? You're not letting things integrate. You're not putting stuff into practice. You're not just being and just seeing the world through these new knowledges or this new sort of lens that you have taken on board. Maybe I'm just too
Yeah.
old for this world sometimes.
Oh, I agree with you. It's about trusting that process and trusting that you're learning things a particular way because that's the way it needs to be done, to allow things to take root, to allow I suppose I have an example where a few years ago when I had that allotment, I had a priestess in my coven. Um, I think she was a newly turned first degree, or perhaps she hadn't quite got that far yet. But the people whose allotment it was that we kind of rented off of had come and quite dramatically pruned our beautiful fig tree, and we were all gutted. And I said, right, go and choose a branch. I want you to take it home. I want you to craft it into a wand. We'll all have a wand made from the same tree. It'll be really beautiful. And people said, well, how? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. You go, you connect with your piece of wood, you create a wand. And this woman could not do it. She said, well, what do I inscribe on it? What? And I was like, well, this is not for me to tell you. Well, is this the correct way? And I was like, well, no, if you want to get up at dawn and go and, but get yourself a sickle. I said, but I'm not asking you to do it a traditional way. I'm asking you to take this random piece of wood, connect with it and turn it into a tool. Well, what if I don't connect with it? Then make it something beautiful. But it was utter carnage, and she didn't end up creating the wand, and we didn't end up working together long term. There were warning signs of kind of how things would go in the future very much. And I think that's another really important thing. You can take people so far on their journey, but that doesn't mean that you're meant to walk together forever. I think we are all instrumental in each other's learning, and that with coven workers, and other people you meet, knowing that you might be there just to spark something in them or just to guide them through a particular part. A lot of people will stop at first degree. A lot of people will come into the outer court and then go, not now. or maybe get to second and say, right, that's it. It's, I think, to not take that personally and to understand that that's part of their journey and that we can only give them what we can give them, and that might be all that they need. And it might be that somebody else needs to give them something else. You know, we attract the students who are meant to learn from us and the teachers who we are meant to learn from.
Yes, yes. And it's always a two-way street as well. So you're always learning. I remember back in the day, a gentleman here was giving a talk at our local pagan moot when it was happening, and stood up very proudly and said, I don't know everything, but I know most things about most things. And I'm sitting there going, well, the more that I learn, the less I realize that I know. So it's just like, oh my goodness, each to their own. So Delphi, we are coming to the end of our time. Now, one thing I would like to ask you, because there is a rise of, should we say, people protesting when it comes to pagan events. And I know recently in Salem and Massachusetts in particular, there was a public circle for Halloween, Samhain there. And it's something that's been happening for a number of years, but this time, and they have had so Christian groups protesting, but this time that was getting more and more sort of like disruptive. And I have heard of someone in the UK was talking about they were having just something in a community centre, and they also had a similar experience. Have you had anything? Because you're doing a lot of this community work, and if you have, is there any sort of tips and how do you handle the opposition, should we say?
So we very recently, a couple of weeks ago, had a witches' fair in Swansea, and that might be what you heard of, where we had Christians picketing outside. I stood on a chair inside and rallied the witches to come and sing some chants on the steps, give them nightmare fodder. No, but realistically, I think that things are on the rise as far as any kind of religious intolerance goes, as far as things are becoming quite dark for a lot of people. And I think the only way to do that is to just light more lamps. So I'm a very, very active member of the interfaith world. It's something that's very close to my heart. I work with the Peace Marler in Swansea and a bunch of other interfaith things, as well as being a team member for the Pagan Fed and I think communication, I think not seeing each other as opposition, but seeing factions of extremists who nobody likes, let alone the people in their own denomination. But being able to talk honestly and openly and with respect. Yesterday, I was at a interfaith seminar in Newport, and we had representatives of the Baha'i, of Islam, of Judaism, of Christianity, and me. And somebody else as well, a Sikh, I think. And we all talked about, you know, the fundamentals of our paths. I talked about paganism in general, and it was a beautiful thing. We talked about how to support each other, you know, being invited to each other's thing. And somebody's come to me after one of these talks before. I think it was an imam, a Muslim imam, and he said, we were talking, and I thought, I'm about to get a telling off now because I mentioned the Kabbalah. And he was talking to the rabbi, and I was like, one, I'm a woman, and two, I was under 40 at the time. And I was like, I'm just going to get told off. But they didn't. They came over and they said, you know, mysticism at the root of it, if you strip it all back, the mysticism in all of our paths is the same. And I loved that. And I think that is open communication and being able to not go out and shout at them and say, you know, what are you doing? But being able to provide a solid front to light enough torches for the dark to naturally recede. But it's definitely getting harder.
Yes, yes. And I like to think too, is that Aman told you, at the end of the day, when you pull back all the layers, which are all very humanized layers, it's all the same thing, really. We're also, like I said, all seeking that connection with the divine. We're just through different lenses. And so unfortunately,
this is connect to each other, human to human, as opposed to my faith says this and your faith says that. The two of the gentlemen who were there yesterday were a Jew and a Muslim, and they're very, very fast friends. And they said they talk about Gaza, they talk about the Palestine Middle Eastern war, And it's hard. They have really hard conversations. They're not all easy, but they talk about them and they retain mutual respect and friendship, which, you know, they talk about these hard things because they need talking about with a group of people, and then they eat together. And that, I think, is crumbs. If they can do it, we can.
Maybe we need to have more sort of communal feasting.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And where can people find you, Delphi? If people are wanting to sort of like, because you're in South Wales, people are interested in coming along to any of your opening gatherings. You are also a Firewalk instructor. Um, where can they find you?
Okay, so I'm just going to blurb my stuff at you. So I'm probably most active on Facebook. I'm not brilliant at technology. So Delphi Nile, Witch and Priestess, or Priestess and Witch, I can never remember, on Facebook. My website has got all my socials, and that's just delphinile.com. There is an ancient Wix site out there. Ignore that one. It's the delphinile.com. And for my Firewalk, I run women's retreats or co-run women's retreats, which is shewolfretreats.co.uk. And yeah, all of my socials are on the website, and I've got an upcoming conference and witches ball in April this year at Craigenors Castle in Swansea. So they're biannual, always set at beautiful hotels. So yeah.
And I'll put the links below this recording on YouTube so people can check those out. So it's been an absolute delight talking with you, Delphi. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and the magic in you.
Likewise, thank you so, so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Blessings. Thank you.
Take care, blessed be.